This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Moreno. You know, if you listen to me, I am quite fond of New York City characters. I don't think there are any characters that are more interesting and more fun than Eliot Gordon. You know, if you read a biography of Eliot Gordon, it's almost like you're reading the biography of 5 or 6 different people, because you can't believe any one person has led that varied an existence in the course of one lifetime. But Eliot Gordon certainly has. It's very difficult to describe Eliot Gordon. He's a producer, a talent agent, a former aide to Mayor Giuliani, an entrepreneur, and a gifted storyteller. And the thing we like most about him, he's kind enough to get up early for us this morning. Good morning, Elliot. Thanks for joining me on the radio.
Frank, thank you so much for having me as your guest. And by the way, besides being Cinco de Mayo, it is also Israel Independence Day, so I'm going to send you falafel to have with your tequila.
I do like falafel, and I appreciate you mentioning that. Now, you know, your sending me a falafel would not be your first foray into the breakfast business. I read somewhere that you actually claim to have been the person that invented the breakfast bagel. Come on, how did you invent the breakfast bagel?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you really did your homework and your research. Yeah, most of those bagels, we're talking about many, many years ago, most of those bagels are running about 4 ounces. So I said, you know something, if I make a 5-ounce bagel, when they hit that with cream cheese and a coffee, that's breakfast, which is probably the way Ed Koch started every morning. So I said, you know what? I'm going to make 5 ounces. Before I know it, I put it on trucks, and I was delivering it to restaurants, and I had it up to 10,000 bagels a week. So I built that bread route, and then I sold it, but I had come up with the name at that time of a breakfast bagel.
Wow, that is wild. You know, it's interesting when we think about you and what you've done in public life and what you've done in comedy, which we'll talk about in a minute, and what you're doing right now. A lot of people don't know that you actually played a pretty significant role in the Camp David Accords, and your work with Leon Charney, and your relationship with Leon Charney led to an interesting collaboration with the two of you. How did you get to know Leon Charney initially?
Well, Frank, I want to make one correction. I was not involved with the Camp David Accords. Leon was. And what happened was how I found out the whole story. And most people don't know Jackie Mason was. But what happened was when I was working for Mayor Giuliani, Leon Charney was very involved with politics. And I would meet him at the functions. He became a very wealthy real estate man, and I think he had like 1 million square feet just in Times Square. So I met him at the different events that I was attending with Mayor Giuliani, and Leon said, "Hey, El, I've got a TV show, and I buy time," because in 1997, you had to buy time in different markets to get your show aired. And he said, "It's all about politics in Israel, and you seem to know all the players in politics." He said, "Would you like to produce my show?" And I did. I was with him for about 3 years and produced about 200 shows, but I became close with Leon personally, and he shared the story. I said, "Leon, how'd that whole thing come about?" And just to revise it very quickly, he said, "El, at the time I was a very successful attorney, and there was a comedian from the Catskills, not a big name, a guy named Lee Tully, and he came to Leon and he said, there's another comedian who went on the Ed Sullivan Show and did his jokes. Can he sue him?" And Leon won a lawsuit. He said that the Sullivan Show had such a big audience, doing jokes on it registered a common law copyright, which Lee Tully did, and that meant no other comedian had a right to that intellectual property, and he won a lawsuit for a comedian having his jokes stolen.
Wow, you know,
so now not long after that, Jackie goes on the Smothers Brothers, and which was another variety show around that time. And they edit his jokes about the Vietnam War. And Jackie Mason goes nuts. He couldn't believe that they actually cut up his material. And he goes to Leon. Leon files a lawsuit, and it works out there's a senator from Indiana named Vance Harkey, very big on First Amendment issues. So it was in the paper because it was Jackie Mason. Vance Harkey sees it. He gets involved. And they had an out-of-court settlement, but it brought Vance Harkey in touch with Leon Charney. He introduces him to a guy named Bob Lipschitz, who's the biggest attorney in Atlanta, representing the governor, Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter gets elected president. Lipschitz goes with him to Washington as the president's personal attorney, similar to Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump. And then Leon is representing a guy named Ezra Weitzman for a book deal. And Ezra calls him and says, Bagel just became elected prime minister. He brought me in as defense minister, and we want you to come to Jerusalem to meet with us. So Leon goes out there. They say, hey, you got a connection indirectly to Prime Minister Bagel through him, through Weitzman. You got a connection to President Carter through Lipschitz. Nobody knows who you are. You're perfect. We want you to fly back and forth as the shuttle diplomat, and that's how Leon played his role in Camp David.
Now, I alluded to your history in New York food delivery. I know you sold everything from Italian ices to bagels to hot dogs. How did you make that transition from having a big food distribution and delivery route to working in the Giuliani administration? How did that transition take place?
There was a nice gentleman. His name was Rabbi Lenny Gutman, and he was friends of mine. And he said, this is 91. He said, Rudy lost in 89, but we're going to go again for it in 93. And we're going to need help in certain areas where you have good contacts. And he brought me in, and there was a gentleman, Dov Heiken, who helped us, and a fine gentleman named Bruce Teitelbaum. And we all kind of like formed an office, just concentrating our efforts on the Jewish community, because with the Crown Heights riots, we felt that was the area where we could move those Dinkin voters into the Giuliani column. And that was the role I played, and we wound up winning the election. And like I said, I stayed on and worked as an aide to the first deputy mayor, Peter Powers. And then once I met Leon, I said, hey, why not go into television?
Yeah, so if people are just tuning in, we're talking with Eliot Gordon. If people have followed the history of New York politics, usually a lot of people that are senior aides for a two-term mayor, they will do maybe lobbying, maybe they'll run for office themselves, maybe they'll go into consulting, maybe they'll go into punditry. You don't necessarily think of becoming a talent agent as the first career for somebody that leaves a mayoral administration. What made you choose to focus on that, talent management and entertainment and comedy, rather than go the traditional route of so many other Giuliani alumni, for instance?
I had a very dear friend who was a very special man named Sid Bernstein. And Sid Bernstein had been the great music promoter of the 1960s. He was the man who brought the Beatles to America. He was manager for Cousin Brucey, another dear friend, Cousin Bruce Morrow. And I think Sid was involved with every major star of that era, Frank Sinatra, Jerry Lewis, everybody. And Sid and I were very close, and I really caught the entertainment bug from Sid Bernstein, and I found that I have an incredible teacher, a guy who's done it all from small shows to Shea Stadium, to teach me how to become an agent, to teach me the area of promotion, of dealing with an artist, and I really caught the bug. And through Sid Bernstein is how I met some guy named Jackie Mason, which we had been friends for 20 years. And then I'm meeting Pat Cooper and Alan King and Tom Dreesen. And these guys said, hey, if you pick up the phone and you get us a job, you got 10% for your pocket. And some of these guys were getting big money, and I got them jobs, and I was picking up big commissions. So that's what took me in that direction, that I had the opportunity, and the teachers like Sid Bernstein and like Jackie Mason, to teach me how to do it. And I just love the fact of earning money by making people feel good. And it became an addiction, and I just kept doing it. And like I said, I wound up with these long-term relationships with Pat Cooper and Tommy Dreesen, and before I knew it, I was getting jobs for Robert Klein, and occasionally some work Alan King and Henny Youngman and Red Buttons, the old-timers. And I found that the biggest treat was having them share their stories of their lives' events with me, of coming up through the Catskills and what they went through. And I didn't realize it at the time, Frank, but I was becoming almost an encyclopedia of an era of entertainment that may have been the most funniest and the most elegant in the history of the entertainment business. And I just kept going.
Well, so you've represented a lot of interesting folks over the years, including a few folks that I've known, and you've worked with some legendary folks, people like Carol Channing, people like Joe Frazier, and the fellow that I was just talking about a few minutes ago, Ed Koch. You represented him?
Yes, what happened was I represented him for speaking engagements. When I was doing the Leon Charney report, Leon knew Ed very, very well. Leon was heavily involved as a fund, giving money to Democratic candidates, and Ed would come on the show. And then I just asked him, I said, hey, Ed, I think I could get you some speaking engagements. Will you allow me to do that? And he said, sure, why not? So in that sense, I represented Ed, getting him a couple of speaking engagements. And again, we became friends. And Ed Koch, to me, was like another entertainer. He was a very funny, charismatic guy. And it was an honor to at least spend a small amount of time representing the former mayor.
If, a couple of the people that you've worked with over the years, I've known, and they're known for occasionally being a bit temperamental. People like Jackie Mason and Pat Cooper come to mind. Now, I know Pat pretty well, and he has a very kind side to him, which doesn't get nearly as much attention as his more irascible side. But tell me a story or an anecdote about your relationship with either Jackie Mason or Pat Cooper, because I know every interaction that I've ever had with both of those guys was incredibly memorable, and I'm sure most of yours were as well.
Well, I tell Pat and I know each other a long time, and he is one of the most loyal, encouraging, cheerleader type of guys when you need somebody in your corner, and I call him a marshmallow simmering in hot Italian sauce. Pat is just constantly funny. Not long ago when he was living in New York, he's in his 90s, and I visited him at his apartment at that time on the Upper West Side. I said, how do you stay in such good shape? He says every morning he goes to Central Park and takes a run for his life. So, so he was just constantly funny. And, I got one great story for him. I get him a job at a place called Ruth Eckerd Hall, which is a theater in Clearwater, Florida, the Tampa area, holds about 2,200 seats. And and he's about 80 years old at the time. I say, Pat, it's the winter. You better go down a few days earlier because there could be a snowstorm. No, I'm going to go the night before. Don't worry, things will be fine. Sure enough, the night before, there's a snowstorm in New York. He calls me from the airport. He said he's locked into LaGuardia. And he says, if there is one plane that's going to be flying out to Miami, and if there is one seat available, I will chain myself to that seat. They'll have to call the cops to get me off the plane. He said it's not because of his money, and I think I got him $12,500 for that job. He said, I'm a rich man. He said, but you have a commission coming. How are you going to get your commission if I don't show up and do the job? How is the promoter going to talk to the audience and give back the tickets? He said, it's called being a responsible person. 80 years old, flies into Miami, sleeps in the airport to get a connecting flight to Tampa, goes right to the hotel, right to the stage, does 45 fabulous minutes, and then he goes back and gets some rest. At 80 years old, he said, it's called being responsible.
Wow. Wow. Talking with Eliot Gordon. And how about Jackie Mason? Jackie, I've seen, even when he would come in and fill in on the radio, he had a side to him that could be, to put it politely, difficult to deal with.
Yes. Now, Jack and I, I'll tell you a fascinating story. Jack and I had been friends for over 20 years. We were introduced by Sid Bernstein, and Jack, very entrepreneurial. Him and I would come up with ideas for different comedy packages or to do different things together. And, 4 or 5 nights a week, I'd get a call from Jackie Mason at midnight because he liked to stay out late. And it was always the same thing. He's in a coffee shop with some girl he's not that thrilled with. He wants me to get in a cab to meet him so we could talk about show business. So I'd be with him 3-4 nights a week. But a very, very special guy. And at times, Frank, you're right, we would get into shouting matches. We would yell. We wouldn't speak for the longest time. Now, 3 years ago, he calls me, and he says, I want you to meet me at this diner later tonight. Let's get together. And I didn't call him back. So he calls me again, very angry. How could you not call me back? I'm a Broadway star. How dare you? Again, a fight. We don't speak for 3 years. Last July, I'm coming out of the subway in Manhattan on 7th and 57th, and there's a guy at a table outside the restaurant having a cup of coffee, Jackie Mason. Our eyes just lock, and he says to me, he said, we've been fighting. And I said, yeah, I heard something about it. He said, let's just get past it. I said, Jack, I agree. We sit down. We're talking about comedians like Myron Cohn and all those guys. He hands me his new cell. He says, call me. We're back on track again. That night, he went into the hospital, and a few days later, never came out.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm glad you guys got to patch things up before he passed away, and certainly an incredible talent.
What happens if the Russians withdraw? The Kiev regime neo-Nazis are taking names. They can get screwed. So I think Russia is going to insist that under a settlement or maybe even possible ceasefire, I think more of a settlement, there's going to have to be a continuation of Russian troops there. And if you're insulted by that, well, unfortunately, might does make right. We have U.S. troops still in Okinawa. We still have them in Germany. And despite requests by the Iraqi parliament, we're still in Iraq. So there definitely has to be a continued Russian military presence in Donbass. Maybe there can be an agree to disagreement on Crimea. In terms of denazifying Ukraine, well, ideally, this is something that the Ukrainians should handle, and I'm hoping that earnest people in the United States are going to start seeing the kind of unbridled neo-Nazi bigotry, disgusting, that has been going on, that has been grossly covered up by our so-called free press. That gets cleaned up. And then there's the matter of the sanctions and also these frozen parentheses stolen assets.
Let me bring Richard in here. Richard, go ahead. Go ahead. I don't even know how to frame the question, so respond as you like.
Let's just talk about that last thing about the neo-Nazis. It was Lavrov saying that Hitler was part Jewish that created outrage in Israel, which has, at least to this time, heretofore, been sort of laying back, on its commitments, to what's going on in Ukraine. First of all, I really do hope that the Republicans run on surrendering and running from our support in Ukraine. I hope that's a major campaign issue.
Well, I think they got a lot closer to that strategy with J.D. Vance's win in Ohio yesterday.
Yeah, J.D. Vance, he didn't win. He's not a senator yet.
Right, he won the primary, right.
Yeah, let's see what happens. This country overwhelmingly is in support of Zelensky and Ukraine. So I hope it becomes I hope J.D. Vance makes it a campaign issue in his Senate race, and dissolving abortion. I hope that's what his campaign issues are. And so getting rid of Biden will stop our support for Ukraine. That's That's 2 years away unless we have another terrorist attack at the Capitol. As for the Vietnam War, Nixon didn't end it. Nixon ran in 1968 on what he called a secret peace plan, and that the war would be over if you voted for him. The war, we withdrew from South Vietnam in 1975. And as for the fact that it was so far away, what could we do? We couldn't supply ourselves. We had 500,000 American soldiers in Vietnam. Russia, which is right next door to Ukraine, doesn't have 500,000 soldiers in Ukraine. And to put a patch over your eyes and say that Putin doesn't have future missions to invade Moldova or to take over the entire southern coast of Ukraine and create a Ukraine that is a landlocked nation. If that's not expansionist or imperialist, I don't know what is. I mean, they're already talking about that third country, and he is attacking Odessa and trying to take over. It's not just if it was just the Donbass, I mean, I could have a very reasonable discussion about the Donbass, where there is Russian support, primarily Russian-speaking people, but this isn't about Donbass. It's about creating a corridor from Crimea across southern Ukraine all the way to another country on the other side. That's where we are, and to ignore that is ignoring the reality of the situation.
Michael, one of the points Richard brought up was something I was going to ask you about, which was the comments by the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov regarding Hitler's Jewish lineage as basically in response to the question of, how can you say Zelensky is influenced by Nazis if Zelensky himself is Jewish? Keeping in mind that you don't necessarily view Putin as the James Bond style villain that he's been portrayed overwhelmingly in the media and all of the West, do the people that criticize what Lavrov said have a point in your view? Was that a bridge too far for Lavrov?
Okay. I actually had an article out yesterday at Eurasia Review. If you Google my name, Eurasia Review, you go to my column, you'll see it's my most recent article. And he didn't choose his words carefully. He's an excellent diplomat. It was not an anti-Jewish statement at all. It got totally twisted. He did not say that Hitler was part Jewish. Someone said, well, how could Ukraine be neo-Nazi if they have a Jewish president? He said, you can be Jewish. I mean, so what? And, he made a reference. There are some people who say that Hitler was part Jewish. Now, what he was trying to say is that, in unfortunate instances, people can find themselves doing compromising things. As I note in my article, during World War II, you had the capos. Both of you might be familiar with these two very excellent movies, Europa, which came out in the early 1990s about a German Jew whose family left Nazi Germany. Then when he was captured by the Soviets, in order to survive, he claimed that he was an ethnic German in the Soviet Union. So this guy served in the Wehrmacht, actually. And then this recent release called The Survivor, about a guy based on a true story. He would fight death fights in Auschwitz. So he would survive, but in turn, the person he was supporting would die. About Vietnam and Nixon, very quickly, the point is Nixon very much deflated, the war there. And again, I have to emphasize this. The fact of the matter is post-Soviet Russia showed a complete willingness for a neutral Ukraine, but it was ultra-nationalists in the Kiev regime and their EU backers that were playing a zero-sum game, and this cannot be accepted by Russia as well as the pro-Russian contingent there, and I don't think that it's really clear at all that Russia actually seeks more than Donbass. But I will tell you this much. If the Biden administration and, say, his hypothetical successor want to continue this conflict, yes, more Russians will die, and yes, this war will go on maybe a bit longer, but many more Ukrainians, make no mistake about this, will die. So they will take over the Donbass now. But then what does that mean? The regime still fights. The next step is they're going to be beyond the Dnieper River. What, the regime is still going to fight on? Hey, it's going to be, a further conquest, and so goes the nation. So goes the nature of war. So the best way to prevent this is to have a different, a saner presidential administration that is not looking to fight a parasitic proxy war at the expense of Russians and Ukrainians. And I also want to briefly mention, too, because I don't know if any of you two are aware of this disgusting crime story that happened in New York, which relates very much to what's going on in there. It's in the New York Post, Frank. I sent you that article.
Yes,
I don't know if you read it.
I did.
And I would be curious to see if this politically correct media would comment on this bigoted bias attack. In a Brooklyn bar recently, a Russian-speaking man was harassed by a Ukrainian nationalist. The Ukrainian nationalist approached him saying, "You have a Russian face." And so this guy who was speaking Russian said, "Hey, I'm from Zaporizhia. I'm Ukrainian. I'm half ethnic Russian, half, Ukrainian." And then this Ukrainian neo-Nazi said to him, "Well, speak Ukrainian." And when the guy spoke Ukrainian with a Russian accent, he got attacked with a bottle. Well, law enforcement was able to come but this Russian-speaking guy suffered injuries, and the Russian-speaking guy made a good point. People who want to do that, let them go over there and do the fighting. That kind of behavior is evident in Kiev regime-controlled Ukraine, where neo-Nazis roam wild. Some of them are unappointed mayors. I can provide the specifics because I know a lot of people out there who rely on mass media. This is all being covered up. In the meantime, people who think along my lines, our lives are in danger. Some of us have been killed, imprisoned, beaten. This is not a democracy, and Zelensky is not deserving of accolades.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't think anybody listening would be okay with somebody being beaten up for being Russian or speaking Russian
I'm not
at
okay
all.
with it either, but how do you know this guy is a neo-Nazi? He could be a thug who's overreacting. Was he calling everybody a neo-Nazi? Is kind of hysterical.
No, it's not. If you know your history, Richard, and that's the problem. A lot of people don't know their history.
Yes, it is. There are white supremacists and neo-Nazis in the American military service, and over the past year, there have been a lot of articles about
Richard,
what we can do to root them out.
Richard,
And you're talking about a guy who got a bottle in his face. We're talking about Putin, who poisoned a doorknob. So a man and his daughter would end up in the hospital, one of them dying, who would send somebody with an umbrella with a poison tip to inject it into somebody, to put a poison into the underwear of Navalny, and then arrest him when he came back to Russia. I mean, to me, I think this argument is absurd. There is the Azov or the Azov brigade that does have neo-Nazi members in it. It's about 800 soldiers out of a force that is
much more,
over 200,000. So yes, it does exist there. It exists in the American military as well, and actually in Mariupol, in that steel plant where they're holed up. As far as I know, the soldiers fighting in there are a member of this right-wing brigade, and that's one reason why they will never give up, because they know they will be summarily executed by the Russians if they do. But to say that Putin is not a James Bond-type villain, after the kinds of things he's done with doorknobs and underwear, umbrellas.
Could I get a word in now?
He is a James Bond type villain.
Could I get a word in now?
Go ahead, Michael. Yes.
Okay. The Skripal thing, even a British court said disingenuously and ridiculously that, well, we think the Russians did it, probably. They probably did it. I mean, what a court ruling. There is plenty of credible information indicating that another scenario could have occurred. You know, the Russian expat community, former Soviet expat community in Britain, a lot of them don't like the Russian government, but they have fights among themselves. So it's very possible that this guy, Skripal, who, by the way, supported Crimea's reunification with Russia, he could have very well have been knocked off by one of these rival exiles, and the rival exile would kill two birds in one shot. Get rid of Skripal and have, the bad guy Putin blamed for it. Also, they were right near a known chemistry place where Britain does these experimentations on drugs related to Novichok. You mentioned this umbrella incident. You're talking about something that happened in the Cold War era with a Bulgarian in the United Kingdom by the Bulgarian Secret Service. That was decades ago. The thing with Navalny and the underpants is unsubstantiated, likely BS. Initially, we were told that Navalny was poisoned by, a tea drink that one of his assistants brought over. But then the CCT camera showed that one of his assistants went to this concession stand, and this concession person, how does he know that this is going to Navalny or that person is for Navalny? It was an unopened sort of beverage, and that looks very sketchy as well. In the meantime, I can give you a good number of people, earnest individuals who have been killed or disappeared by this neo-Nazi regime, and I'm sorry, you don't think that nationalist, the way he carried on in Brooklyn Bar, is not neo-Nazism? We have a different interpretation of what that means. And in terms of Azov, let me tell you something about Mariupol. A lot of the people there are ethnic Russian and pro-Russian. I remember a few years ago, the BBC, the arrogant reporter spoke scornfully of two Mariupol residents who were saying, Russia and Putin are right, and the BBC reporter arrogantly said, of course these people don't know what they're talking about. There's a lot of pro-Russian propaganda here, like he knows better than they do. The reason why Azov was sent in large numbers, and their numbers are much bigger than 1,400, by the way, Richard, you want to fact check that. But anyway, the point is this, they were sent there because it's a pro-Russian area, and they wanted a jackboot put on these people. What's really disgusting is how the media keeps referring to this so-called mayor of Mariupol. That guy fled, and for good reason. And you want to know something else? He was not democratically elected, as is true with a lot of the mayors in Kiev regime-controlled Ukraine. It's not a democracy. It's a corrupt kleptocracy, and there's neo-Nazism going rampant, and I can give you even more.
All right, well, we got to pause. Richard, we'll give you the first opportunity to respond when we come back. I got to take a quick break.
Oh, listen.
One fella that believed in Atlantic City throughout that entire time was David Pena. He is a legendary nightlife impresario and the owner of Boogie Nights and Planet Rose at the Tropicana in Atlantic City. The Boogie Nights Club at the Trop is now celebrating its 10-year anniversary, and that's 10 years that has included some really tough times for Atlantic City, not the least of which has been COVID, and it's great to see he's still standing along with Atlantic City. David, thanks so much for joining me on the radio. Happy anniversary.
Thank you so much, and happy Cinco de Mayo to you and your audience. Frank, it's always a pleasure to be on your show, and thank you for the great hype up. I appreciate that.
Hey.
And, actually, I have been around Atlantic City for a long time. Atlantic City is my new home. I'm originally from New York. And so it's a very exciting time right now in Atlantic City. But I wanted to thank you really, from the bottom of my heart, and a lot of people in Atlantic City, we always talk about this. The fact that you put a spotlight and you focus on Atlantic City at least once a week means the world to us down here, because we love the connection between New York. We obviously, have our customers coming from New York, Philadelphia, New Jersey. But it's really cool that you actually put a focus on the city, and not just the casinos necessarily, but you're exactly right. All the characters that make up Atlantic City, because it really is a cool location, and I find it my new home for sure. I've been here many years, but I've decided Atlantic City is always going to, be where I do business. It's also going to be. I live on the ocean right next to the Tropicana Casino, so I can't beat that. I work here. I love the atmosphere here. I understand the rhythm of the city, and it definitely has a unique, quality. It's not a cookie cutter city or town, and that's what I love about it.
Same.
It's got its ups and its downs and whatever, but it is what it is.
Same. Couldn't agree more. All right, David, there are a lot of people listening to us who go to Atlantic City regularly. There's a lot of people listening to us around the country and around the world that have either never been to Atlantic City or haven't been in some time, and that all of the people that I'm just describing, they may not have been to Boogie Nights. What exactly is Boogie Nights? Remind us.
Yes, absolutely. Boogie Nights is the ultimate 70s, 80s, and 90s dance club, and we're located at Tropicana Casino in Atlantic City. We've been there, and we're celebrating our 10 years this year. We had a big 3-night blowout last week, which was fantastic. Headlining was Tiffany, who helped us celebrate our 10-year anniversary. She was with us when we first opened at Tropicana, so it was a very meaningful event.
Tiffany from Blondie.
Oh, no, Tiffany, who sings I Think We're Alone Now.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Pop icon of the 80s. So she was sweet enough to come out. But Boogie Nights is for those who haven't been there, you can go to boogienightsac.com. And if I could paint the picture, it is we got a light-up dance floor. We have probably the largest disco ball you've ever seen in your life. We have a great light show, great sound system. And basically the idea is we take everything great from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we try to, go over the top by, kind of not, I wouldn't say exploiting, but, taking all the qualities, whether it's fashion, the music, the styles, the energy of those great decades, because they really were some of the most colorful times in the music industry, the fashion industry. It's when we had Madonnas and Michael Jacksons and stuff like that. So we give you that retro nostalgic feeling. As a matter of fact, if you look on the video screens, we have, we want to make sure that you're hearing the nostalgia, but at the same time, it's at a contemporary pace. We have great DJs. We have characters, which separates us really from a lot of the nightclubs. I always call it Studio 54 meets Disneyland. And the reason I say that is because it is very colorful. It's a very fun atmosphere. And the characters are Roller Girl, Mr. Boogie. They take pictures with the Boogie Beaver. We have celebrities that are constantly showing up there or even performing there at Boogie Nights that you remember hearing on the radio in New York for sure. And we try to give you the whole escapism experience because, you figure you're driving in from New York or, coming down for the weekend, you saved up for the week and you want to go to a nice dinner, you want to see a show. And I feel like Boogie Nights gives you that escapism because everybody walks out of there feeling happy, excited. And I hope I think that's one of the reasons for our longevity. Boogie Nights is really catered to the customers, and we ask them what they want, and we kind of read the crowd really well. And we always make sure that we look them in the eye, we smile, we give them the best experience they could possibly have in a nightclub. And we really, go out of our way to do it. And I think the customers appreciate it, and it becomes like this loyal following. I get all excited when I hear somebody from White Plains, New York, or Manhattan, or the Bronx, or Long Island reaching out to us and saying, we come down there specifically to go to Boogie Nights. And I understand why, because it really is that you could spend 3 hours there and you felt like you had a full vacation and a memory that lasts forever. So hopefully we deliver that, and I think that's why we have people coming back, and we're grateful for it. So I want to invite everybody in New York and everywhere else listening out there to please come by Atlantic City, stop by Tropicana, and definitely experience Boogie Nights. We're open every Thursday and Friday, Saturday night, every week, and we have a big one coming up tonight. We have Cinco de Boogie. And then tomorrow night we have every first Friday of the month we do something that's extremely popular. It's called the Cougars and Cubs Ball. So we crown a Cougar of the month and a Cub of the month, and it's a lot of fun. And believe it or not, it's one of our more popular events, and it's consistent, and people can count on seeing that. And then on Saturday we have our world famous Hot Moms contest, which we do every year in honor of Mother's Day.
Now, if somebody wants to be considered for the Cougar or Cub of the evening or the week, or one of the Hot Moms, how do they submit their resume for consideration?
Well, they just have to be at the club one, and we have our MCs and our characters wandering through. So Roller Girl might be coming at you, our MCs might be coming at you, and you could just actually talk to them and say, "Hey, I'd like to enter the contest," and everybody's welcome to enter the contest. It's so much fun. The first year we did the Hot Moms contest. We don't do it anymore for the sake of time, but we used to have them do like motherly chores, like make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, fold, do some laundry. I remember one time we had Michael Jackson over a lady's lap, and she had to discipline him by spanking him. It was fantastic. It was one of those weird experiences. But now we just have them really dance it off and just show their personality, and the crowd really gives us their reaction, and it's a lot of fun, and it's innocent fun too, which is cool.
So would you say, because the music is more 70s, 80s, and 90s themed, that the crowd at Boogie Nights tends to be a bit more mature than some of the other nightclubs in Atlantic City?
Good question. When we first started, that was the case. And we definitely, we had the middle-aged crowd, but now we have probably some of the youngest crowds we've ever had, and I think that's because Tropicana offers a lot of great amenities, whether it's restaurant dining. It's like the capital of bachelorette parties, and birthdays. So there's a lot of celebratory events. But we are seeing, and when we first came back after the pandemic. And thank you very much for having me on too, because I think you could hear it in my voice. I was a nervous wreck before opening. I always feel like, will anybody show up to the party? And then I was, pleasantly surprised when everybody was there, and it was a packed night. And I think, after that time period, it gave us like a good gauge. We were like, okay, it's going to be busy for the first few months. Atlantic City had a lot of volume going on. Everybody just wanted to get out of the house, but that could fizzle out. It's, can you go the distance? And what happened was we were snowballing. And since actually hanging out with you on New Year's Eve, by the way, thank you for that party. It just continued to go up and up. And I kept looking at it, and the crowds, there was new crowds coming in. We have Stockton University that's also has a campus in Atlantic City, but the crowds were just getting to be all ages. And
right.
What's cool about that is, what I love, one of my favorite things to see, and I see this all the time, somebody gets a VIP booth, a bottle of champagne, or whatever it might be, their daughter or somebody just turned 21, and they're able to party with their aunts, their uncles, their family. Just last week was my daughter at the 10-year anniversary, and it almost made me cry. I'm dancing with my daughter on the light-up dance floor. She's been around Boogie Nights since she was a little girl in Atlantic City. She knows every showgirl, every casino dealer, all the security. Everybody knows Lily. So, of course, I had security all watch her the night. But it was just great because all the different generations could go and party together, and that to me is a very rare thing that you see happening specifically in nightclubs, and I cherish those moments for sure.
Now, in terms of Atlantic City more generally, by the way, if people are just tuning in, we're talking with David Pena. He is the owner of Boogie Nights, which is at the Trop, and a great karaoke bar, which is one of my favorites, called Planet Rose, which is also at the Trop. In terms of Atlantic City more generally, what goes on a day like today, aside from what you're doing at Boogie Nights? Where do you dine on Cinco de Mayo? Where do you go for drinks on Cinco de Mayo? How do you throw yourself into the fun and revelry of a Cinco de Mayo event?
That's a great question. There is forgive me for not remembering the name, but it's been around forever. It's near Bally's. It's just not coming to the top of my head right now. But there's a beautiful local Mexican restaurant that I go to all the time, and I think all locals as well as visitors know it very well.
It's on the boardwalk? It's on the boardwalk?
No, it's off the boardwalk right near where Ruth Chris is, at the walk.
I think our mutual friend AC Mike has told me about that spot. But you know what spot? And I haven't been there, and I do want to check it out, and I'm going to look at the name. Is it El Tecate?
No, I don't think that.
No? Okay, well, so be it. Or it could be Los Compadres. Los Compadres?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. But anyway, there's
you can't miss it. It's the most colorful, exterior on the. I believe it's Atlantic Avenue.
There is a terrific Mexican place actually in the Trop. At least I think it's terrific. called Casa Taco and Tequila Bar. That has really become
Fantastic place.
one of my go-to spots. Do you go there at all?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, anytime I do a late night, I like to treat myself to a nice breakfast at Trop, and I go there all the time. They have a fantastic brunch. As a matter of fact, Mother's Day is coming up, so not only Cinco de Mayo is a great time to go there, and I'm sure it'll be packed, but also Mother's Day, too. And you know what, Frank, one of the things, I've lived in Atlantic City close to 20 years, or at least the outskirts of Atlantic City. I'm Beacon and Atlantic City, proper now. And one of my projects for this year, personally, is to explore Atlantic City outside of the casinos and try to discover new places and restaurants.
Yeah, by the way, is it Los Amigos? It might be Los Amigos.
Los Amigos.
Yeah,
that
okay.
is it.
That's it. I've not been there, but I passed it. I'm looking at the outside, and it fits your description, and it has been voted best tequila and rum bar in Atlantic City repeatedly. But I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because one of the great mistakes that I think a lot of people that listen to this segment make is that they visit Atlantic City and they'll go to whatever casino they enjoy going to. Sometimes they'll even casino hop, but they don't step outside. They'll go to Trop, they'll play at Trop, they'll eat at Casa Taco and Tequila Bar, then they'll sing karaoke at Planet Rose, and then go dance at Boogie Nights. Maybe they'll see a movie in the IMAX theater there, but they don't step outside and appreciate the rest of the grandeur and the incredible things happening in the 48 blocks of Atlantic City. Now, I've asked people about this, and I've said it on the radio, and repeatedly, I have been told that the reason some people don't enjoy walking around Atlantic or Pacific Avenue or the Orange Loop, Tennessee Avenue, and so forth, is because they think there's a problem with crime. As somebody that lives there, as somebody that works there, give it to us straight. Is Atlantic City an unsafe city? Is it a city that you would feel unsafe walking around in?
I'd say it's a city like any city that you have to be cautious in. What helps is I'm from New York originally, so I always got eyes in the back of my head. I'm always looking at my, through my peripheral. I always see my surroundings, and it really is a question of. So for people that it is a good idea to walk the boards in the daytime when it's light out, and really also kind of zone in on the places you might want to go see. So therefore, you can Uber, take a cab over, and there's maybe there's 2 or 3 blocks of great restaurants, or a new movie theater that just opened in Ventnor, and local places around that area. My suggestion would be to definitely take some transportation in the evening time and kind of have a ballpark of where you're going.
We will give you The Other Side of Midnight baseball cap from the WABC radio store. Whoever has the funniest joke. We'll determine the 4 of us, myself, Matt Blaze, Philippe, and Alex Barnard, which of you has the funniest joke. We'll do this for 10 minutes or so, and if anybody has a good joke within that 10 minutes, that's who we'll give the cap to. Tom is in Brooklyn. Hello, Tom.
Happy Cinco de Mayo, Frank. Very good to see you. Anyway, this guy walks into the doctor's office on Friday and says, "Hey, Doc, I've got 3 dates this weekend. Could you hook me up with some Viagra?" The doctor says, "No worries, I got you." Same guy comes in on Monday. His arm is in a sling. The doctor says, "What happened?" He goes, "None of my dates showed up."
Okay, that's not bad. I like it. Joe in Ronkonkoma. Hello.
Hey, Frank, tomorrow. Happy
Hey.
Cinco de Mayo.
Likewise.
I got 3 quick ones for you, okay? Why couldn't the pony sing a lullaby?
I give up.
Because she was a little hoarse.
Okay,
Okay.
that's funny.
A ham sandwich walks into a bar, orders a beer. The bartender says to the ham sandwich, "Sorry, we're not serving food."
Okay, that's a little better. I like that one a little more.
And this is the final one. The biggest joke ever. He's in the White House right now, Joe Biden. Have a good night, Frank.
Thank you, Joe. Robert in Manhattan, what do you have for us?
Good morning. When the late Barry Farber told me this, I laughed all night. Okay. A Jewish couple named Rosenberg win the New York lottery, and they're so rich they can hire themselves a real English butler, someone who looks like Alfred Pennyworth out of Batman. They don't even know his name. They call him Jeeves. One day afternoon, Mrs. Rosenberg says, "Jeeves, we're expecting our best friends, the Weinbergs, for dinner. Please set places for 4. So she bustles around the house, and about 5:45, she walks into the dining room, and she looks around, get a peculiar look on her face. Jeeves, she says, come in here. Yes, Mom. Didn't I tell you that we were expecting our best friends, the Weinbergs, to set places for 4 at 6? Yes, Mom. Well, unless I'm seeing double, how come I'm seeing places for 8? Oh, Mom, I was about to tell you that. Your friend, Mrs. Weinberg, called, and she said she and her husband are coming, and they're bringing the bagels and the bialys.
Spectacular.
That's not bad. That's not bad, Robert. Thank you. That's good anti-wasp humor, right? Ray is in Woodhaven. Hello, Ray.
A guy walks into a talent scout's office and says, I've got the greatest actor you've ever seen. So the talent scout says, I've heard that a million times. He goes, no, really. He reaches in his pocket, takes out a little tiny piano, reaches in his other pocket, and takes out a little man. Seats the man at the piano, and the guy starts playing classical, rock, jazz. Talent scout says, this is unbelievable. Where'd you find this guy? He says, I was walking along the beach, kicked the bottle, genie popped out so I could have whatever I wanted. Talent scout says, you asked for a 12-inch pianist? And the guy says, no, the genie was hard of hearing.
I have heard that one before, Ray. That's a good one. I knew that where that one was going. You know, that reminds me of, it's less of a joke and more of a true anecdote. This is back in the days when Johnny Carson was hosting The Tonight Show. You know, his producer in those days, towards the end, and a good portion of the time that Johnny was there, was Fred DeCordova. And Fred DeCordova would have all these people trying to get booked on The Tonight Show all day. And then this fella comes into Fred DeCordova's office with his dog. And he says to Fred, Fred, I've got the smartest dog in the world. You've got to book him for The Tonight Show. Well, we do animal acts with people like Jim Fowler and others, but, we kind of have our whole routine. No, you don't understand. This dog's not just smart. This dog talks. All right, well, that's interesting. Well, let's see him talk. So the guy turns to his dog. He says, Rusty, how would you describe sandpaper? And the dog says, rough. Then he says to the dog, Rusty, what's on top of the building where we are? He says, roof. And then he says, Rusty, if you had to pick, who would you say the best baseball player of all time is? And he says, Ruth. And then Fred at this point says, all right, I've seen enough of this. I don't have time for this. I don't have time to deal with charlatans like you. I have people trying to come into this office all day long and get booked on the show. He throws the guy and his dog out. At that point, they're out. They're kicked out on the street. And the dog turns to his owner and he says, DiMaggio? Frank on Long Island. Hello.
Hey, Frank, I love the show. You're keeping me alive, bro.
Thank you.
Hey, how can you tell if a physicist is also an extrovert?
I give up.
He stares at your shoes.
Not bad, Frank. Not bad. Fred is in Yonkers. This is going to be interesting. Hello, Fred.
Hey, Frank, good morning. Did you hear about this geometry teacher? She got in trouble for teaching her kids the Chief Sokotoa song. Sokotoa, Sokotoa. I didn't think she was trying to be racist. She just was born under a bad sign.
See, yeah, I knew it was going to be a punny joke, Fred. Not bad. Okay. You got to like puns, which fortunately I do. Al is in Amityville. Hello, Al.
Good morning, Frank. I just got up. The timing was beautiful. I just had some coffee. Anyway, this guy goes to the doctor. He has a very high-pitched voice. He goes, Doctor, everyone looks at me. They laugh at me. I have no friends. What could you do about it? So he goes into the examination room. He unrobes, and the doctor says, boy, you're very well endowed. He says, you must have a lot of girlfriends. He says, oh, my God, they're knocking down the door. They're calling me up 24 hours a day. He says, that's your problem. If you remove half of it, you'll have a normal voice. So a week later, he comes back. He hugs the doctor. He goes, Doctor, my voice, I'm not embarrassed to be in public now. The only thing is, the girls ain't calling me up anymore. Is there anything you could do? He goes, I don't know if I could
do it. Not bad, Al. Jeff is in Queens. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, Frank. This comes to us via a guy you might know. For 20 years, he did a psychology show, Armand DeMille. He passed away a while ago. Mm-hmm. You know the name. So he told this joke. So Einstein was home having his driveway repaved. And then his wife hears him yelling at the kids. He says, honey, she says, what are you yelling? You love children. What are you doing? He goes, I love children in the abstract, not in the concrete.
Paul in Newark, hello.
These two Irish guys walk out of a bar. It could happen.
I've told that joke myself once or twice. See, I can tell that joke because my wife is of Irish descent, and so is my son. That's one of the reasons I married someone that had both Irish and Jewish heritage, so that I could make jokes of all persuasions. Dino's in Ohio. Hello.
Yeah, what did the Mexican guy tell the IRS about his taxes?
I give up.
No obligation.
No obla. What's the last part?
Obligation.
Oh, obligation. Okay, that's not bad. Not bad. David is in Yonkers. Hello.
Yeah, so just married couple, honeymooners, and the groom wakes up in the middle of the night and he sees his bride with a flashlight reading a piece of paper. Honey, what's going on? She says, I'm reading our marriage license. In the middle of the night, why are you reading a marriage license? I'm looking for the expiration date.
Todd in Maplewood.
Yeah, what's the difference between a Jew and a canoe?
What, between a what and a canoe?
A Jew.
Oh, boy. What?
A canoe tips.
Oh, boy. He doesn't deserve a rim shot for that. We're going to get letters for that one. Anthony in Edison, hello.
Yes, good morning, Frank. I start my shift with you every morning. I always appreciate it.
Thanks.
My joke is what is the world's most famous Jewish wine?
It's what?
I want to go to Florida.
I've heard that one before, actually. That doesn't seem as mean-spirited as the canoe one. Sean is in Park Ridge. Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Frank? I got a good one here. A woman walks into a library, and it's packed, filled with students. And she says to the librarian, I'll have a cheeseburger, French fries, and a Coke, in a really loud voice. And the librarian is disgusted, and she looks at her, and she says, this is a library. And the woman looks around, and she notices everybody, and she says, I'll have a cheeseburger, French fries, and a Coke.
I'm great. I really like Asbury Park. I was there the first day that New Jersey allowed outdoor dining. That was my first time there. Hung out on the beach. Beautiful beach. Went to a nice restaurant. I think it was a Tim McClune restaurant. And I really enjoyed it. I had a good time there. Went with my wife and my brother and his girlfriend. We had a great time.
I'm glad that Asbury is on the other side of the state near Pennsylvania.
Are you kidding? Wait, New Jersey has two communities. I figured this was. I mean, he called. A lady named Beatrice Burgess before, and he said that she was on the Upper East Side and then the Lower East Side. So I figured you got just Philipped again. But there's an Asbury, New Jersey, and then there's an Asbury Park, New Jersey.
That's correct.
This is news to me. I have no idea. So what county is Asbury, New Jersey in?
So it's actually in Warren County, and it's a small rural farming community.
Wow. Do you have a farm?
I do.
What do you farm on there?
We raise hay, we raise corn, soybeans, we have a flock of sheep, some chickens.
Do you get eggs from the chickens?
I do every day.
So you're not really suffering with this eggflation that we're experiencing in grocery stores?
No, we're not.
All right. Well, Joanne, I don't know how we would work it out, but maybe you could send me some of those eggs sometime. I'm
not sure how to do it, but I'll try, Frank.
All right. Thank you. That's all we can ask. All right. Well, I'm rooting for you now, big time, because I love farmers, especially in Asbury or even Asbury Park. I'm not sure if Asbury Park has a lot of farms on the beach, but maybe they do. All right. Are you familiar with the game, Joanne?
I am.
Okay, great. So the timer will begin after I ask you the first question. These questions are pretty easy, so you should win. You should get this. All right. What is a common... Just don't get nervous. That's the key. Yesterday, the guy knew it, and he got screwed up, okay? What is a common nickname for Robert?
Bob.
Name a newspaper in New York.
The New York Times.
What social media company did Elon Musk just purchase?
Twitter.
Who was the star of the motion picture Rocky?
Stallone.
In baseball, what is a home run with the bases loaded called?
A grand slam.
What state is known as the Bluegrass State?
Kentucky.
What band was Freddie Mercury the lead singer of?
Queen.
What city was John F. Kennedy assassinated in?
Dallas.
Who named the Pacific Ocean?
Degamo.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. The Pacific Ocean, good guess, though, was named by Magellan. Ferdinand Magellan. But you did great. You got 8 questions right, which is more than we've had in quite some time, which, under the Katsimatidis rule, entitles you to $100.
Well, okay.
So congratulations.
Thanks a lot, Frank. I had a great time.
Well, yeah, so did I. Congratulations on $100. Hopefully you can use a portion of that to find some special packaging to send me some eggs. Give Philippe your number. That's not bad. Okay. All right. She got 8 correct. Lost on number 9. Who named the Pacific Ocean was Ferdinand Magellan. But she did well.